What do you know about web security and FileMaker Pro? Hi, this is Don Clark of FileMaker Pro Gurus and FM Database Consulting. The following video is part one of a four-part series featuring Rosemary Tietge, a FileMaker Consulting Engineer. Rosemary presented at the December 2014 New Mexico FileMaker User Group meeting, and her presentation is basically an updated version of her DEVCON 2014 presentation. So get ready. You'll learn all about the threats you face and the steps you can take to protect you and your clients' FileMaker data. Enjoy.
All right, so thanks everyone. Good to see you all again. Thanks for having me, and Matthew.
Where do I look? Where do I?
You just look on any one of these. So this is the presentation I delivered at DEVCON last summer, and I've done a little bit of updating, but I haven't updated like the latest bits of security news, just because I've been running ragged the last couple of weeks, so I haven't done any major updating lately. But my task at DEVCON was to talk about security in the broader sense of the overall security and threat landscape, rather than just how do you turn on security in FileMaker and FileMaker Server. So I did a bunch of research, and I structured this around the same pattern as some of the major security briefs that come out annually from the big security companies like Symantec and McAfee and Verizon. And I really took a holistic look. And the reason for that is there's a lot of alarming numbers out there. The first 63,437. Next one is 1,367 and 40 million. And so overall, that's the number of confirmed security incidents that were reported by Verizon in their data breach investigation report last spring. And of those, about 1,400 had some sort of confirmed data breach. So security incidents, people poking around the edges, and then 1,400 of those had data breaches, and 40 million is just the number of credit card and debit cards stolen from Target in the 2 weeks, there's 2.5 weeks they were vulnerable last year around the holidays.
Numbers low. And you know how they got in?
I'm going to talk about that. In fact.
The final number is 72 million.
Yeah. So yeah, this was the number I probably as reported in summer. But there was 72 million, from Target, and then there's been another 100 million across all the other breaches earlier this year. I know Home Depot was some more scary stuff. 30% of data breaches are targeted at small businesses, and 2/3 at businesses with fewer than 1,000 employees. One of the things I hear all the time when talking to our customers, our smaller customers, our enterprise customers, our government customers, they're all very cognizant and aware of security and employing best practices. But we hear all the time, and I hear from developers all the time, that their customers say, we're too small, we're not a target, there's no interest here. You're wrong. Even more important and more scary than the 2/3 of data breaches or attacks are against small and medium-sized businesses, 60% of small and medium-sized businesses close within 6 months of a breach, and 72% shut down within 2 years of a data breach. It's a significant risk to business, and everybody needs to be more aware. And one of the other things I did as I was preparing is I asked people what keeps you up at night. So do you worry about any of these things? Have you shopped at any of the places that had data breaches in the last year? Do you worry about zero-day vulnerabilities like Heartbleed from the spring and Poodle more recently? So vulnerabilities in software that we all use every day and that the internet runs on. Viruses and malware. Do you, even though you're running a Mac, do you run Symantec or another endpoint protection? And do you keep it up to date?
Even though it's up to date, it's still behind.
Well, exactly. You're always behind. Targeted phishing attacks. are you subject to them, or do you warn your family, friends, and business associates about those? We'll talk a lot about those in a bit. Finally managing passwords, especially in the wake of Heartbleed. I admit do not follow best practices. I have about 6 passwords I use regularly. I know.
Fluffy, Fido, what else?
Yeah, exactly. No, they're all really pretty robust passwords, but I have the one that I use for assets at work that I only use for work, and I use it for like 3 different systems at work, and then I have one I use for a variation of for all my banking, and then one I use for random registrations. But managing them is a real nightmare, and keeping them up to date and changing them frequently, as we showed, also a challenge. That's what I do. And then end users, they do stupid things, or they do not necessarily stupid things. They do things that they think is the right thing and don't. So when I surveyed people, I had one friend or one guy I asked said, what keeps you up at night? He said, everything. My entire life is encrypted. But he's a computer security analyst for the Secret Service. So his view is even more, uptight than the rest of us. But, we do everything electronically, and we need to take action to protect ourselves. I mean, in the modern world, realistically, we can't pay cash for everything. We can encrypt a lot of things, but we can't necessarily encrypt everything. You've got data out there. You go to the doctor, your data is now out somewhere, and you hope that your doctor.
HIPAA has it completely under control.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a great website I really loved. It's a data visualization of recent data breaches, and this is a snapshot of it, but let me click through to the web. And it's informationisbeautiful.net. And then you can search there for data breaches if you want to see their visualizations. And, so here, we've got some more. Here's Home Depot.
Sony in there?
I doubt that this was updated. Yeah, this is updated fairly frequently, but we can go look and see how were things leaked, what was the method, and they're almost all hacks. You can filter it by sector, or just show financial services companies. Roll over the bubbles to get more information. And if you actually click on them, you've got some links to get to other things. So it's a fun data visualization that I found while I was researching. That's been fun to keep an eye on. So there is this broad threat landscape, and for the talk I organized it around the categorization report. And part of what I really liked about the Verizon report is they identified these 9 kind of threat areas for data breaches, and then reported on them based on industry and gave concrete actions you can take to protect yourself. So if you're in the retail industry, the single most important thing you need to do is lock down your point of sale system. Everything else is secondary. If you're in healthcare, the single biggest thing you should be thinking about is dealing with known users doing bad things or known users doing mistaken things. Those are the biggest risks in the healthcare sector. So for example, so what I tried to do in the talk is I'm going to talk about some attack vectors. I'll talk about the incident patterns, and then in there talk about who's vulnerable on those patterns, and also talk a little bit about compliance. When we talk about healthcare, talk a little bit about HIPAA. When you talk about point of sale, talk about PCI. And then, throughout, also talk about how FileMaker, has you covered in all of these threat areas if you, use FileMaker well and use FileMaker's built-in security rather than trying to roll your own. And then finally, I've got a lot of resources at the end of the talk. So some growing attack vectors in the last 18 months to 2 years are targeting attacks. You know, we've all gotten the random phishing email from a bank that we're not a customer of, or, you know, I have $1,000 or $1 million lottery winning. Will you just split it with me? You know, those are all phishing attacks. Spear phishing is an attack where the hackers, the bad guys, get a list of people who would actually be interested in something or who have access to information they want, and then craft a much more realistic message to just those people. You know, so if you want to go after small business financials, you target the bookkeepers at small businesses with an invitation to visit a website that is a forum that might be of interest to small business bookkeepers. And then you have malware that installs in through the browser in what's called a drive-by attack or a watering hole attack. You invite people to come to a compromised website, and then you get the compromise their systems that way. And the other is the zero-day vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities that, you know, suddenly become public before there's a patch and that the bad guys can immediately exploit. And targeted attacks aimed at small businesses accounted for 30% of targeted spear phishing attacks last year, and at least 1 in 5 small business was targeted with at least one spear phishing email in 2013. Total social engineering attack, and it's really about being aware of what to look for, you know, training your customers, training your colleagues. Don't click links in emails that you're not expecting. You know, if you get an email that looks legitimate, don't click the link in the email. Go visit that website actually. You know, teach people how to investigate headers of suspicious emails. You know, it's not that hard. Most email clients, you can just click a button and see the full headers and realize, oh, you're telling me this is from PayPal, but really it's from some, you know, .ru email address, right?
That's a funny story.
Uh-huh.
My brother forwards an email to my mom and I. It says, "Look how good this hacker's email is. Don't click any of these links." What's my mom do? Oh no! Doesn't read anything that he wrote. Goes and clicks all the links.
Uh-huh.
Of course, she's got a PC.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that example, though, it's humorous because your mother made that mistake, but it's also brings up a point, and the point is this, that there are many individuals at businesses who you could instruct them all day long not to click the links, and what they're going to do, they're going to click the links. We had one in our office last year. She clicked the link and dropped a rootkit into the only PC in the office, which is the one that was that horrible QuickBooks or something runs on, and then it sucked up all the QuickBooks information into I don't know, North Korea or somewhere.
Right.
But so saying tell people not to do this.
It's hard. Yeah.
So it's easy to say not to do it.
Yeah.
To get the person to internalize that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the latest one from the security one is that the hackers going in and monitoring your email traffic before they do anything, so that they know who you're talking to, and only interject in what conversation that you already have going. And so you think it's from so-and-so, they're just following up with a conversation you already had.
Yeah.
So yeah, very, very well crafted.
Yeah. You know, so I said, 1 in 5 small businesses, 1 in 2 enterprises was targeted. And the other thing is the front line for these is moving up the supply chain. So you're not going to target someone at Target. You know, the Target attack actually happened because they targeted a vendor. And then through that vendor got access to the Target network.
Through the heating and cooling.
Through the heating and cooling, yes. Some other attack vectors that are becoming prevalent are social media scams, malware on mobile devices. You know, Android is a hugely vulnerable platform. for attacks.
So is your car. You know,
Yeah.
It'll lock down the systems in your car if you hook it up to Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
There, you know, possibly. So,
Yeah. You know, and the other thing is people,
and the Internet of Things.
you know, people even when they shouldn't. I mean, I know, you know, Apple has a really strict policy about not storing any business documents on cloud services, Dropbox, Evernote, including iCloud.
Yes.
You know, any Apple Confidential, any work stuff, not on iCloud.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, but people do it anyway. And a lot of small businesses, especially, you know, I talk to small businesses all the time who use Dropbox for their file sharing. It's just really scary. You know, the other thing is you share logins and passwords, right? People don't necessarily adhere to the like single identity, single user has their own account on systems. You know, and all of these things put employers' data at risk. And the Internet of Things, which is another one of those things. Like everyone asks me, well, I just bought a house, you know, do you have a Nest yet? I'm like, I don't actually think I want my thermostat to be, I would love to be able to control my thermostat from far away. But
not with Google doing it.
Exactly, but I don't know that I want Google to know what my...
They did a really good job with the software side of their Nest. But
Yeah.
if you go to Black Hat just did a hack, and they actually hacked in and was able to control the whole, rewrite the whole code. They, instead of the little Nest screen, they put different, like the matrix falling to acid rain, bunch of stuff on the screen, control the whole thing.
Yeah, doesn't scare me. So...
And I think everybody probably saw here the 73,000 cameras worldwide that still had password as the password that were on the internet.
Yeah.
Controlled by Russian kids. That's who's got that website with your webcams on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Putin's army.
Yeah. So to go to those 9 incident patterns, I kind of broke them up into 3 subcategories. One is people and things. You know, this is really the low-hanging fruit in every organization that doesn't take a lot of work to secure and will improve security just by leaps and bounds. The next is secure systems that handle credit cards because that's the high-value information, or, you know, trade secrets, anything that's secret and core to the business. And then the last is there's sort of 3 other categories that are really, you know, crime patterns. For the standpoint of FileMaker's customers, they're not, you know, with a few exceptions, like all the Department of Energy sites, they're not threats that our customers usually, you know, worry about. It's things like cyber espionage and denial of service attacks. You know, some large enterprises might be subject to those, but it's usually not something that the teams doing FileMaker are worrying about. Now, so starting with the people and things. Yeah.
You're listening in.
Yeah. My single biggest takeaway on these 3 attack patterns of insider and privilege misuse, physical loss and theft of hardware and software assets, and miscellaneous errors is that every industry is vulnerable and it's pretty easy to overcome most of them in a really straightforward, just by following straight up best practices. So authorized and known people doing bad things. You know, the most extreme version of this in the last 1.5 years or so was Edward Snowden, obviously. You know, he took advantage of his system's administrator status and rights to steal thousands of documents from the NSA. You know, but people do it all the time. And most misuse occurs in that sphere of trust where staff have to have access to systems to secure to do their jobs. And in my experience, this is something, especially in the small business community, people are either incredibly paranoid about or incredibly lax about. There's not really there's no middle ground. You know, some business owners are like, yeah, I'll just let my employees have access to everything. You know, and in cases like that, I talked to a developer who said that he had a customer who fired And so fired someone in his business, and before that person left, he exported everything out of their FileMaker database because he had permission to do it. He left, and the next day he started calling that business's customers.
Yeah.
And the business owner heard about it because one of his customers called him and said, hey, do you know that this is happening? So then he was able to proactively, reach out to those customers. But, really simply, disabling export in FileMaker would have mitigated that risk. On the other extreme is you have the business owners who don't want anyone to have access to anything, to the extent that people can't do their jobs, that the business owner or manager becomes the bottleneck because they don't want anyone else to have access to potentially mess up data. Right. And so there were about 12,000 incidents last year of breaches caused by insider and privilege misuse, and 88% of them were actual privilege misuse. And how did I do that? I didn't want to do that. Yay for Keynote. And top industries for this: public sector, real estate, administrative, transportation, manufacturing, and mining. I think the big one there is public sector. That's a big concern for we have a lot of public sector customers, and it's really just about doing the right things and making sure that you're hiring ethical and honest people, and then also limiting their access. Don't give a system administrator access to everything because they probably don't actually need it.
It's illegal not to hire Democrats.
Yeah. The first, most important thing you can do is know your data and know who has access to it. Use that principle of granting only the access users need to do their jobs and no more. And use FileMaker's built-in security model rather than trying to roll your own or relying on security through obscurity in FileMaker systems.
Pretty easy to block everything up and then open them up slowly with people's screens that I need this.
To do this, exactly. Then the other, use the, don't use the built-in privilege sets. Start with your own, but use the privilege sets. Don't layer, we see so many customers where they layer some sort of security model on top of the FileMaker security, or they just don't put fields on layouts and think that that's sufficient to, remove access to fields. But if you can get into table view, you can see all the fields in a table and put them on a layout, unless they're blocked. If you block a field in the security layer, and a user with limited privileges goes into table view and tries to add, they won't even see that field in the list. They will not know that field exists at all.
Well, I found that with FileMaker, and you can contradict me, do this a lot more than I'm doing more period, but I found that the custom menus was the best route to take with people, because that way you make a custom menu and you put just those couple little things at the top that they need, boom, it's done. And then you have their logon automatically loads that custom menu.
I mean, custom menus work to an extent, but they don't secure the data layer.
No.
You need to use accounts and privileges to secure the data layer. And custom menus can be bypassed. You can still get around custom menus. Even if a user has limited privileges, if they get a copy of FileMaker Pro Advanced, they can change to the regular menus. They can disable custom menus. So, I mean, it's a good way to reduce the risk of people accidentally doing bad things, but if they still have access to the underlying data, you're not protecting the data.
So somebody got a hold of a copy of FileMaker, yes, I don't know if I'm interrupting your pitch or not, but if someone got a copy of that and they could subvert the custom menu, could they then not subvert the privilege, access and privileges? No,
they still need a full access. So in FileMaker Pro Advanced, you can change what menu set you're looking at, right? And that's not restricted by privilege set. But if they go to managed security, you still need to put in full access credentials to get to managed security.
Right, I understand what you're saying.
So, if they've got limited access to the underlying data, there's things they can't, there's tables or fields that they can't see. There's, you know, tables or fields that they don't have edit privileges in.
Right.
They're not going to be able to get around that just by installing the
And when you
full
say
regular
edit
menus.
privileges, what you're referring to in FileMaker is the left side, you pick security.
Yep.
Okay,
Manage
that's what I
security.
did. I did all of that, and then on top of that, I put the custom
Yeah.
menus.
Yeah. Right. What I'm saying is custom menus by themselves aren't enough.
Okay, I got you.
Right. You know, other things you can do, you know, host on FileMaker server, because that limits the ability of someone going to a file share and grabbing your entire database and walking off with it, or attacking it with a password cracker, or, you know, other things. You know, password crackers all require physical access to the file. So if your solution is hosted on FileMaker server and your server's in a locked room with very limited access, you know, no one's going to have access. No one's going to be able to have physical access to the file. You know, and then, you know, a few other really important things, and I think I actually had some slides in here.
Teaming FileMaker servers and such.
What do you mean? Like,
They actually have what's called a red team come in. They actually try to gain access.
Yeah, we do penetration testing and things like that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, by policy, we generally can't talk about what we do with security and vulnerabilities, but yes.
We can find out what the CIA does.
Right. You know, a few other things, you know, when you're hosting on FileMaker server, turn on SSL and use a sign. If you're going to turn on SSL, use a certificate. Don't use the FileMaker self-signed certificate. I mean, that's really important, and that's a change we just made with the new version of Server V5 that came out last week. If you have SSL turned on and are using a self-signed FileMaker certificate, we will now turn off web publishing, because, you know, we will support HTTP web publishing, but we do not want our customers using HTTPS for web publishing with a self-signed certificate. You know, we also really don't want you using the FileMaker client server SSL with a self-signed certificate. You know, we do the self-signed certificate really just for testing. If you want to use SSL, go to one of the supported certificate authorities and invest in a certificate.
I thought you start off web publishing. FileMaker 13, is that gone?
No, there's still instant web publishing is gone, but you still have PHP custom web publishing, XML custom web publishing, and the new FileMaker Web Direct web publishing product. You know, so a few other important things to do. As soon as you put a solution on server, as soon as you make a new database, you know, turn off login using that auto login using account no password, using admin and no password. You know, you go to DEVCON or you go to any gathering of lots of FileMaker developers, and you open remote, you'll see a whole host of FileMaker servers, many of which are still running the fully unlocked server sample or server test database, right? And now with things like perform script on server, you can actually launch an attack against that file. You know, you can get in, you can edit that file, you can run a script on server that inserts lots and lots and lots of container, large files, fills up the hard drive, or runs a script that sucks up all the server resources and causes the server to crash. You know, there's a lot of attack vectors through unsecured files on FileMaker server. So, you know, disable this, use SSL with a signed certificate. The other thing is, it's not usually enough to just turn off the auto login with admin, but put a password on your admin account. Actually, better yet, create a new full access account with some other name and some other password. And if you really want to foil people, you know, set the admin account up to use the guest privilege set or something, so that if people do try to use that attack, you know, they can get in, but they can't do damage, or just make it so that that's just not an option at all. And a lot of this is outlined in the FileMaker security guide of, you know, the exact steps to take, but you guys all seem pretty smart. You've probably already figured that out. You know, other things to turn on are file access protection, which is on the third tab of managed security. And that is the protection that prevents other FileMaker files from connecting or using that file as an external data source without full access credentials. So that's important. That's just a really good and important way to protect data. And finally, review user accounts regularly. Disable accounts, as soon as they're not being used. And this goes for, FileMaker, goes for Active Directory, all systems. Better yet, use external authentication if you've got a directory server. There's no need and no reason to manage accounts manage individual user accounts and passwords inside of FileMaker solutions. Huh? It can use Open Directory and Active Directory. So, and if it's, anything else that acts as an LDAP domain server, if it looks like Active Directory or Open Directory to the server, you can use it.